Hello, everyone. Welcome, Louise Mazanti.
Thank you.
This is my second chat with you, Louise.
Yeah.
You are an esteemed colleague, and I would like to quote from your website that you see yourself as a visionary change maker. You help people grow as human beings. You work with individuals and couples who want to feel embodied, connected, and oriented toward the future. And you call this inner leadership.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like to add to what you do?
Maybe just to say that I'm a psychotherapist and I run a professional training as well. So just to put it a little bit into context, that I work as a therapist with individuals and couples. Yeah.
Brilliant. Welcome back. We had a conversation about couples and couple therapy, couple counselling. I hinted about preparation for long-term relationship as a separate but connected piece of work last time. Our intention is to continue talking about couples and couple therapy today.
Yeah.
So those who are watching this may want to see the first chat because we covered 6 or 7 different important headings in terms of the society, trends we see as therapists, and also different paradigms in the West and in other societies, relationship between men and women in particular, talked about heterosexual couples in particular. Today, we've agreed to focus on one of those 6 or 7 topics that we discussed last time, and it's the topic of the nuclear family phenomenon in the West. Both you and I live in London, UK, but we have an experience of the West from other countries as well, I understand. So this phenomenon, which is problematic, the nuclear family, in terms of childcare and also quality time and a few other issues. And both you and I seem to be quite passionate when we talked about it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village for a couple to thrive. So I'm really looking forward to talking about this area. My first question, Louise, would be, how can a couple build a community in a Western society based on busy work schedules?
Ooh, yeah, that's kind of the question. I do believe that we need connection. Metaphorically, we need the village. We need people around us that know us and can hold us. And they are not necessarily our blood family. Sometimes it's not possible because we move away, like both of us have done. Sometimes it's not possible because the family of origin is not together anymore, or there's too much rupture in the family. So there's many reasons why our family of origin is not that. And also our values can be different. So there can be many factors why it's not our family that will hold us. And I think the very important communities that we need to create is communities of shared values, which is not necessarily what we have in families, but find the people that have the same values, share the same kind of truth, the same perspective on life, and create friendship groups. And not just friends, but also activities together. Like we share meals, we share trips, we share activities, we help each other if there's something, that needs to be done, so that it's also a community that's based on looking after each other, sharing help, sharing support, so that we can allow ourselves to become dependent. So that our community is not a community of performance, which sometimes, friendship groups can become a little bit like, this is our stage to show who we are. So there's no vulnerability. But I think what we deeply need is communities where we feel we can be ourselves, where there can be shared vulnerability, and where we can depend on each other. And I think that the point of depending on each other is really important, because that's where we can allow ourselves to relax enough to not be on the edge all the time. And there's so much in not being on the edge, but being relaxed, which impacts the way we are in our relationship, how we experience our relationship, the way we are with our children. It's the whole way around. The more relaxed, the more vulnerable and supported we can feel, the better life quality we have.
Thank you so much. It's a very comprehensive answer. That makes me even more excited about this talk. I feel like you covered so much ground, and I would love to be able to explore each of those threads that you're illustrating there. Wow, where do we start? Values. How do we find people who share similar values? Western society is historically a Christian society that has become largely secular. So what are these values?
What are the values? That's such a good question. I think it's important that we drop from the mind, from judging. Do we come from the same cultural, societal background? Do we have the same kind of job? To drop into a felt sense experience of how does it feel to be with this person? How does it feel to be with this couple, with this family, in this environment? And let ourselves instinctively find the people that we resonate with, because values have they have something to do with our cultural conditioning, our societal position, our jobs, how we see ourselves, our identity. But our values are really about the people that we are. How much do we value emotional availability? How much do we value going out and doing things? How much do we value doing things for others? It's very different what kind of values people have from different walks of life. And I think the question we need to ask ourselves is, where does it feel good to be? When it feels good to be in a place, it's because our values resonate, because we are not on the edge, because we are not in a feeling we have to perform or discuss, or it's difficult to be in that environment. So values are less about conceptual, intellectual values and more about human values.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I feel like I want to explore some examples. So I'm going to self-disclose a little bit. Therapy maniac, as in not only I work with couples mostly, and also individuals full-time in my private practice, but I like to spend a substantial part of my free time taking part in self-development groups, some of which I organize myself. And what happened to me since I started doing that about 4 years ago was that I created an online, before the pandemic, I was organizing groups from my place. Then it became mostly online, and I created a community of like-minded individuals that I share so much in common with. And history, as you know, makes such a difference in friendship. When you've been through a journey of meeting a person regularly and sharing things deeply, they become your friends because they've been consistent. They've been showing up to those groups, like yourself, consistently over a prolonged period of time. And then I realized that, in real life, some of my previous friends I had less things in common with, and my time is limited, and a lot of my social life / self-development life became people that had similar interests as me: self-development, communication, talking about feelings. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because not everyone would do it the way I do it. And And I would like us to cover a variety of ways where people can practically, you said, going to activities, going to maybe children clubs. Practically, how can you say a couple feels that at this point in time they don't have this healthy village? Maybe it's a large village, but it's not healthy. Practically, what can we cover? A variety of ways to go about meeting and retaining friends.
I'd say the first thing, you kind of hinted at it, which is show up. Show up, be consistent, be available, and be present. And that means not always prioritizing to show to the world, I'm such a busy person, which must mean I am so important and I'm so successful, so I don't have time to show up. It's putting the ego to the side. It's not about performance. It's not about impressing each other. It's about presence. It's about showing up. So the consistency is very, very important. And you said another thing, you said shared history, which is absolutely crucial. Shared history. And that means doing things together, having gone through sorting something out. Let's say practically we are clearing the garden, or we need to get rid of some rubbish, or there's something we can help each other with, or we go play football with the kids, or something that we do together. And sometimes it's almost like we have to go through a bit of hardship in order to bond. So
right,
it's not.
Can I clarify one thing? Sorry, Louise. It sounds like you're referring to strengthening existing friendships.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Sure. So what you're saying is the potential of a lot of our friendships, existing friendship, is bigger than we realize. So it's not a question of reinventing oneself and changing and meeting new people. It's also a question of humility, investing time in these relationships.
I would always say start with where you are. Start with where you have, because that is always more. And a thing that I feel we are not very good at is we are not very good at being honest, being authentic, being present. So, you know, in a little bit more superficial friendships, it can be very much about sharing what you've been up to, which is a little bit of a performance. Like, I've been up to this and this, instead of talking about how we feel, talking about the real stuff.
Yes.
And that's the way into deepening a connection that feels like a village, that feels like there's a real value in it, because superficial conversations, there's no real value in how it makes us feel. And that's why I come back to, how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel relaxed? Does it make you feel alive and engaged? And if we just keep kind of being a little bit fair weather friends, or show up for dinner where we're trying to impress each other, we don't develop any meaningful contact. So start with where you are and have real conversations. And of course, and also be open to other people. It's very simple. Like, who's around in your local community? What's happening in the community? It's very as simple as, you know, living in London, we don't even speak to our neighbors. We don't even speak to the lady in the coffee shop. There's so much respect of the privacy that, I mean, it's a little bit different in the cultures in Southern Europe that both you and I know very well, where people are a little bit more open. I would say the more towards the north, and I grew up in Denmark, it's the same. We're very reserved. We're not very open. And we think that's a hallmark of etiquette, that we're very private. But we miss out on some really vital connection that makes us feel alive and makes us feel like we belong. Just if we have a little, you know, say hi to your neighbor, have eye contact, have 10 seconds of chit chat, because if you slow down afterwards and just notice, how does it feel? You're probably going to have a little bit of a smile on your face after that brief encounter. And we cheat ourselves of so many opportunities to feel alive and belonging just because we think that that's not what you do. You don't talk to people that you don't know, but it feels good.
Yes, yes. You touch on a trend of conversation that you and I seem to be quite interested in, which is the new paradigms and old paradigms, and perhaps Southern Europe and Asia and other parts of the world may be included in these older paradigms. And it's such a deep conversation because there's pros and cons in all of these paradigms. God, there were so many things I wanted to comment on. Yeah, yeah. Yes, I mean, I think doing some homework when you choose an area, because there are areas of London that they're more community friendly than others. There's so many different. So sometimes we look at a website that says, "Oh, this is good upmarket area," and then we may end up in neighborhoods that are not particularly friendly, but in theory, they are one of the best neighborhoods you want to be. So partly that. Then you talked about work on your existing friendships.
That's a big one. It's the same, Francesco, it's the same how we are with our friends and how we show up in our intimate relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same.
Yes, yes. Now, finally, what excited me is coming back. So, how the relationship between men and women, which we discussed quite in depth last time, links to this is to me is quite an interesting direction I want to take this. So you said, bring your vulnerability to the friendship, invest time, and also show up with your vulnerable, bring some vulnerability, and notice how the gender differences overlap with this, because last time you were saying that you feel like men have made some progress with regards to communication and listening skills. Perhaps, there's slow steps in the right directions, and that women sometimes appreciate, sometimes don't appreciate as much as men need, because without enough validation for your efforts, you don't know whether you are going in the right direction. So when it comes to friendships where both you and your partner participate in, I feel like, women's natural gift to open up and talk to their girlfriends about important things is not extended to the quality time as a couple. Because on the one hand, in the nuclear family, there is this ongoing trend where women are expecting their men to step up more than they have with communication. On the other hand, they have girlfriends where they get their needs met with regards to that. So there is a frustration that my man doesn't give me that. My girlfriends give me that. And every time I talk to my girlfriends, I also realize how deficient, in inverted commas, my man is. And that's where the village can be so powerful, because I feel like that when a couple spends quality time with another couple, say, for example, not necessarily another couple, could be another family, that they have those, sufficient values in common, etc., then whichever contribution those four people make seem to sort of be more accepted, validated, and rewarding, appreciated. That's what I was
Yeah,
looking for.
yeah.
Appreciated.
Mhm. I think that's really important what you say there. That is, as human beings, we have a deep need for feeling appreciated, for feeling
Mm-hmm.
seen.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we need other mirrors than necessarily just our partner. And that is of real value, to feel seen. It's
Mm-hmm.
the feeling appreciated, feeling seen as a human being. And I think that's a need we all have.
Mm.
And that's again why I want to come back to the ability to be authentic and vulnerable, because that's the only way that we're actually seen. If we're always talking about something outside of us, we're talking about politics, we're talking about opinions, we're talking about something outside of us, but there's nothing that there's actually real connection from inside, it's difficult to really form a bond if we are not showing up as human beings. And that goes for both men and women. And I don't believe in outsourcing. I'll get the connection, I'll get the talking about my emotions, I'll get it with my girlfriends, and then I have the need met, and then it's okay, I can't get it with my man. I don't believe in that. I believe that as a society, collectively, we have been dominated by the masculine. We have been, our values and the way we structured everything has been dominated for good and bad, and absolutely also for good. I'm not in any way discarding that, but it's been the patriarchal structures and the masculine way of thinking that has dominated our values, and that needs to change, and it's beginning to change, with the feminine also rising so that they can be in connection. And the feminine has to rise both in men and in women. And with the feminine is the ability to feel each other, to be present with each other. It's more emotional availability. And I think we need it. We need it as society. We need it as couples. We need it as families. We need it as human beings. We need it as society, because that is how we belong. And when we belong, we care. And that's one of the problems now. We don't care about each other because we don't belong. It's not my tribe. It's not my family. It's not my society. It's not my place in the social structure. It has nothing to do with me. It's not my country. It's not. And that's the big problem we have collectively on the planet, is that no one is feeling connected enough to care. So I feel that care, that emotional presence and availability is what we need at the micro level of in ourselves and in our couples, and also in society. That's how we feel we belong. There's no belonging if we're just having interesting conversations about things that have nothing to do with our reality. It's about our felt experience of reality. When we started exchanging that, then we're forming meaningful bonding. If we're just offloading our thoughts, there's no real bonding happening.
Another very comprehensive answer, very helpful. If you were to sort of summarize the key words
in what I just said.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say meaningful connection that we are all longing for. Meaningful connection happens when we are emotionally available with our felt experience, not just talking about things that have nothing to do with our reality. That's how we bond, when we show up with what has meaning for us. And we all need that to create healthy relationships, healthy families, healthy societies.
No, I agree. It's interesting that as a woman, you give your perspective on outsourcing, that you believe that is not sufficient. You need to share enough experiences of not just as a one-to-one with your male spouse or partner, but also within other individuals that acts like mirrors. And then you elaborated on how can it be real quality time, this, because you could be meeting other couples and not be quality time. What's adding, what's nourishing our marriage, what's nourishing our relationship? And yes, I'm a big fan of spending time with the village, spending time with other families, other couples, showing up with your vulnerability.
I think there's two phases for a healthy, functional couple and family relationship. It's both what do we have outside, what is our network? Do we have those healthy, nourishing connections? Absolutely, but that's not enough. Of course, it has to be between the couple, there has to be enough healthy connection as well. And this is why I was talking about, it is very important that the feminine qualities, the sense of connection and presence and emotional availability is also there, because if it's not, it becomes a functional relationship. Then one partner is doing his part and the other partner is doing their part, and it's functional, but there's no real connection, because the real connection doesn't just come from we're running a family, we're running this and that, and we have great friends, but actually we don't have much in common. And having in common, that means we have to bond by being emotionally intimate and available to each other. And I don't think there's a way to bypass that.
Not at all. Not at all. I suppose the way I'm approaching today's talk is, given that last time we talked about couples and the one-to-one relationship and couple therapy. Well, I also mentioned preparation to long-term relationships, and I remember your agreements.
Yeah.
So couple therapy would be a remedy to those couples that didn't know each other enough, didn't prepare perhaps deeply enough for this commitment, and then things happen that create baggage, emotional baggage, resentment increases, and then therapy is needed. Fortunately, some couples engage in therapy before that resentment gets to a level where it's not repairable. So even if the couple had a lot in common, because like you were saying before, you can have a lot in common with some friends, but don't put in the necessary work. You can have a lot in common with your husband or wife, but waited until it was too late to take the right steps.
I think a problem is that we don't learn how to be in relationship. It's that we're just kind of thrown out there, expected to figure it out, but we don't learn how to navigate human, intimate, sexual connection. And I think we could, instead of waiting until things have gone wrong and it feels so painful that you really have to do something about it, it would be much better to have a more healthy and realistic expectation and some basic psychological self-awareness and awareness of how to be in a couple, how to be present, how to be available, how to communicate, all these things that we don't learn, that are very basic, that could prevent a lot of the pain that exists between couples.
Yes, we don't learn it, so we didn't put enough time in talking about them, because in a way we learn from so many different sources. There are the traditional Christian values that may or may not seep through in secular societies. There are the liberal values. There are values coming from movies and the entertainment industry, social media. So when a couple reaches this crisis, there is a lot of things we learn, but these values are not necessarily in harmony with each other, and we buy into multiple sets of values from different sources. So my point is, preparation for a long-term relationship would be to say, like, out of all these things that are out there in society that I click with, resonate with, what are number one and number two for me? And for you, my dear boyfriend or girlfriend, what's number one and number two for you in terms of values? And we only find out later down the line.
I think you're spot on there in questions that couples don't ask themselves, which is this a good life partner? Not just, am I in love? Am I attracted? Does it, is it reflecting? Does it feel good? Is it reflecting back positively on me to be in this relationship? Great, then I continue. But asking ourselves, is this a good life partner? Do we want the same thing? Do we have the same values? And people tend to forget to do that when they're in love, and they just get taken by that feeling. Plus they get taken by, oh, we should probably move on in this relationship because we're expected to get married and have a family at this stage of our lives. Instead of asking that difficult question, are we compatible as life partners? Can we grow together? Do we want to grow together? Do we want the same things from life?
This thread is just non-exhaustible in one or two or even 10 podcasts. So if that's okay with you, I would like to go back to the idea of building a community, building the village around
Yeah.
the nuclear, the nuclear family. I keep having something that really sort of turns me on, and then when I'm about to say it, it's just gone.
Take your
It's
time.
gonna come back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We can just take a pause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, we can take a pause. I think Socrates, the philosopher, used to call it aporia.
What does that mean?
When a conversation reaches a few seconds where there's nothing that fires you up, like you just did, Louise. One acknowledges that, and then after a few seconds or half a minute or 1 minute, there is something comes back.
Yeah.
Socrates called it the logos.
Okay.
And I believe that's in between couples as well. Sometimes we think about, as in, I'm an individual, you are an individual. How can I get my needs met? And how can you get your needs met? And it becomes a negotiation.
That's how
it can be like a Brexit transaction so what's the best deal for both parties? In human relationship, it just cannot be like that. There is something that it's us. That's what I mean. It's like the logos of my conversation with you. We are co-creating something, and a couple co-creates something together. And it's not just a question of giving up some of your. It's not always a question of compromising. I need to give up some of my needs to meet yours. But it's just empathizing with us, not just empathizing with you.
That's a good point. Because that has to do with who are we as a couple? What are our values? What can be created in the field, the space, the entity, the vortex that we are? What are we about? Not just two individuals that are now just kind of getting on with their lives now as a couple, but what is overlapping in the Venn diagram of these two individual people? What is the synthesis? What is the magical thing that can exist between us?
Yes. And today we really feel like talking about the relationship between values and all of those aspects, the village and the quality time, all of the practical things that a couple does. And our perception of, oh, this was quality, or he behaved in the right way, I feel value. All these labels that we give, oh, that was good, or that wasn't good enough, is so bound up with our values and also the infrastructure of our lives. So for infrastructure of our lives, for me, is childcare is another big one. The nuclear family has a huge problem, financial and emotional, and in terms of roles between men and women. When it comes to childcare, it almost always leads to different levels of resentment and misunderstandings. So in an advanced Western society such as London, can we explore ways to navigate this? Is babysitting and nannies the only solution, and who is performing the role of the babysitter and nanny?
Yeah, it's I love this question. It's a very, very relevant question, and I think I can go two ways with it, and I both believe in them. First of all, I grew up in Denmark, in Scandinavia, that has one of the best childcare systems in the world, which creates a beautiful, respectful balance between men and women. Because childcare it's not free, but childcare is available for everyone. And that means that women can actually return to work. They don't have to pause or end their career because they have children. So there's a lot of support for being a family, which for me is essential for equal opportunities for men and women. So that is a thing that I can see we lack. We lack that in the UK and in other huge parts of most parts of the world. We lack that. We lack a really healthy, good, nourishing, reliable, affordable childcare system. So people rely on either one parent stays at home, usually the mom, or on nannies or grandparents, and grandparents are not around that much. So it's on nannies, and who can afford a nanny? And it becomes all this, there's a lot of pressure. On the other hand, you can say the Scandinavian system is built on the fact that women have to join back to the workforce, which means that the children are actually not with their mothers since maybe 6 months or a year at best.
With neither parents.
With neither parents, yeah. They're just in kindergarten. And that's not really the future either. To be sent away as a little child that actually needs both the nourishment, the comfort, the connection, breastfeeding, all the things that just, disappears. So I'm not saying that the Scandinavian model is the future or the right way. I'm just saying it's very, very functional for the equality between men and women and creating a different harmony in couples. Because there's a lot of difficulty with a model here where people have to make up their own childcare. They have to pay for nannies. They are reliant on that. And what is the quality? And that's not a great and supportive system for families. So I think the question is, what's the third way?
Indeed, different governments deal with it in different ways that we can learn from each other's cultures, each other's governments, each other's policies, excuse me. I'm also thinking of how nourishing is, I feel, to my bond with my community. I'm very lucky. Over the last 7 years, I moved to an area of London that feels very community. The school is 5 minutes, the primary school is 5 minutes away, and there's a lot of families, and our children go to the same school. So it's been wonderful. There's been a lot of children who had the same age of my daughter, and so they could do sort of play dates after school. So the same girl would be your neighbor, but also your schoolmate. So that's a very fortunate situation. But it was so nourishing to sort of it's so nourishing, I feel, to our bonds in the community when a neighbor is performing that role.
Yeah.
In the older days was grandma, and now sometimes or often, when you're lucky, is your neighbor who's allowing you and your wife or partner to go to the theater whilst your daughter is having the sleepover. That goes back to do some homeworks, also choose the right area.
Yes. And it comes back to what you said in the beginning about the village. We need a village. We need to feel as a couple that it's okay if we go out one night, our children are going to be okay. They're well looked after in the community where we all know each other and trust each other. We are bonded. It's not some nanny that just comes in, or some childminder that is coming in for a few hours and we feel a little bit bad and uncomfortable about it. But that we as a family are being held in a wider community, that's the most healthy and nourishing, of course.
You make another good point, guilt. I suspect that even those more financially fortunate families that are in a position to have a lot of free time because they can afford professional childcare, there is an ongoing sense of guilt for, I'm leaving my child, not with a stranger, because after some time, if you're lucky enough that your nanny or babysitter hasn't moved on, and in Western societies, people change professions often. So it's not so frequent where the child can have a consistent bond with the childcare provider. But say that, you have all these tick boxes, financially you can do it, and then your nanny hasn't moved on. Still, you feel some more guilt because you haven't left it with a friend. When you live in somebody with a neighbor and a friend, there's no guilt.
Yeah.
I feel the opposite. If I'm very fond of my neighbor and I've known them for some time, I feel it's a plus that my child is not spending one more night with me, but is also spending it with a different family. It's enriching her.
Yes. Yeah, I so agree completely. And the big difference, Francesco, is also that if you leave your child with a babysitter, it's a function where it can be a wonderful person and they look after your kids really well, or a nanny, or but it's a function.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very different from a naturally formed bond that you have with your neighbor or your friend, because you've gone through a journey together, you have experiences together, you have meaningful connection of shared vulnerability, shared needs, shared dependence on each other. Maybe not as much vulnerability. What I mean is dependence. We depend on each other. You do that, I do that. We trust each other. We do it because we're bonded, we're connected, we're friends, we live together, we have shared lived experience,
Shared
which
live
people don't have.
experience.
Yeah.
Yes. Of
Which you
sharing
don't have
different
with the function.
forums. Exactly. When you say the function is, I only know you performing this role very
Yeah.
well, but there is only one forum that we have a shared experience with. The neighbor. There is the community garden. She's the mother of my friend. I planted carrots with her, and I know her husband. I know the other siblings. We went to the residents association meetings together. The child has experienced that person as the mother of her friend, and in so many different roles. And so there is something that feels very familiar, safe.
Yes. Yes. I love what you're saying here, because this is what makes real connection and real bond. Like, we are real human people because we see each other in different situations, not just as a function that's paid for, by the way. It's a function. Like, here's a teacher, here's a nanny, here's a coach, here's whatever it is. That's a function. But see people in a living society, in a living environment where we do different things together. That's the village. That's a healthy, deep bonding and connection and belonging. You don't belong with someone that's there performing a function. It's a completely different thing. So being a part of and belonging.
I feel like we could potentially, on that note, bring this to an end, because I feel like this deserves another chat. I don't know if you have any conclusions to draw from it, but there is a lot of hope. I feel
I think
there is a potential. There is a potential.
And my conclusion would be, it's kind of the same thing I say every time, but it's about connection. And the more we see of each other, that's how we can bond. That's how it becomes real. And that's exactly, that's the village. The village is not a function. The village is living, breathing relationships that change. And that's what we deeply need as human beings.
On that note, Louise, I've thoroughly enjoyed the session, and thank you so much. And hopefully we can have one more.
Absolutely. Thank you.